17 big wins, only 2 defeats, 8 big KOs to his credit. Give a warm DC welcome, please, to Ancee Gedeon. And his opponent, fighting out of the red corner, he's wearing the Army camouflage fatigues here at the Armory. Weighed in at an even 115 pounds as well. From the nation's capital, with an outstanding professional record, 17 wins, only 1 defeat, 11 of his 17 victories have come by KO. He is the Los Angeles Forum favorite where he now resides, but making his hometown return here as the WBA Pentacontinental Champion, but that title not on the line tonight. He's rated number 5 by the IBF, number 3 by the WBC, the most exciting, certainly the fastest flyweight in the world. Blink and you're gone, Mark Too Sharp Johnson.
All right, gentlemen, I've been over your instructions earlier. I remind you to obey all my commands, protect yourself at all times. Touch gloves, good luck to both of you.
Gary, you talked about those ratings. Since that time, the fighter that Too Sharp fought remained ahead of him in the rankings. And something I can't understand. If you had watched that fight, the commentators didn't give Mark Johnson a chance to win that fight. And as the rounds went on, contrary to what Mark was doing in the ring, it seemed that the commentators stayed with the named fighter. And to their dismay, Mark Johnson came out of there with what we knew would be a well-deserved victory.
And I tell you, Johnson showed a lot of heart in that fight. He took some beautiful shots from Alberto Jimenez, and he came back and just did a fantastic job. And he's continuing his winning ways. We'll see if he can do it here. First round, scheduled for 10 here from the DC Army. Mark Too Sharp Johnson takes on Ancee Gedeon from Haiti, who has an outstanding record in his own right at 19-2 with 8 KOs. He now lives in California, originally from Haiti.
And Mark Johnson, as you can see, is a southpaw and comes out in the southpaw stance. He's a beautiful fighter to watch. You can see it, he comes out, he establishes his jab, tries to make sure his distance is straight. And he keeps his opponent in front of him at all times, so he's in a good position to hit. Gedeon, also an excellent fighter. He comes from the West Coast, and these two fighters, I think, have fought once before.
But they know each other very well. Talked about that at the press conference as well. Beautiful shot by Mark Too Sharp Johnson. Johnson said he learned a lot from being on the West Coast, different style of fighters, a lot of guys his size. He gets a lot more competition in his weight division on the West Coast.
And something else that a lot of people may not realize, flyweight with the small weight, aren't too many American fighters. Mark Johnson is one of the few American fighters to ever fight for a title in the flyweight and come out successfully.
And of course, look at the champions in that division. You're talking about a guy who may face Mr. Mark Too Sharp Johnson at one time. Coming up, Yuri Arbarshkov from Japan, originally from Russia. He's the WBA flyweight world champion. So possibility those two could get together and fight each other for the title.
It's very difficult to fight a southpaw fighter because everything that they do is unorthodox to you. But since most of the time they're fighting right-handers, they know exactly how to fight them. And Mark Johnson isn't the kind of fighter to not look good against. Even if you could figure out his style, it would be hard to beat him.
Inside the final minute of round number 1, scheduled for 10 here from the DC Armory. Gary Williams along with Charles James bringing the action here on Boxing Spotlight.
Good body shots.
Going both ways. Oh, nice right hand there by Gedeon. Again, Johnson has shown he can take a punch.
You can see Johnson dig into the body. That's the kind of work that gets you into those later rounds in good shape.
35 seconds to go and counting in round 1. Good power shots here from Mark Johnson. Gedeon staying right in there.
And Mark Johnson is setting up those right hooks to the body by the positioning and the way that he positions his man in front of him. There you saw a perfect example how he digs to that rib section with that right hook.
15 seconds to go in round 1. And just the body shots going right back up to the head.
If Gedeon continues to keep getting hit with those right hooks to the body, it's going to make him more susceptible for the overhand left by Mark Johnson.
We've come to the end of round 1. Stay with us. Here we go, round 2. Scheduled for 10 here from the DC Armory. Mark Too Sharp Johnson And the camouflage trunks, record of 7-1 with 11 KOs. Going against Ancee Gedeon from Haiti, 19-2 with 8 KOs. Mark Johnson being trained by his father, Ham Johnson. Ham Johnson, a boxing Hall of Famer here in D.C. And he's been with Mark Johnson not only through life from day one, of course, but through his boxing career from day one as well.
In the interview I had with Mark Johnson, I got to talk to him about the controversy concerning a father training his son, and Mark said he wouldn't have it any other way. He feels very comfortable with his father in his corner, and he also respects his father's advice. And that's one of the biggest factors of having your father in the corner. It's got to be someone that you respect what he tells you out there.
To tell you the truth, this is the first time I've really got a chance to see Mark Johnson up close since he's been fighting, since he's been on the West Coast. And I see a smarter fighter, Charles, in Mark Johnson. More going to the ribs. He didn't do a lot of that when he was fighting early on in his career.
Well, there you saw an example of that straight left hand being made effective by the good jab by Mark Johnson. Gedeon is a good fighter. He's come in here and he's thrown some really good punches at Mark, but he's just a hard fighter to hit.
Good left hand there by Mark Johnson. Again, Mark Johnson is a bona fide southpaw. He's not right-handed fighting in the southpaw style. He is a southpaw.
Gary, you were talking about Mark looking a little more polished now. One of the things that going away from your hometown does, it forces you to grow up quick. You're in a situation where now you're probably not the favorite fighter, and you have to win the crowd over. And the best way to do that is with good boxing skills and giving them a great show every time out.
Past the halfway point in round 2, scheduled for 10. Ancee Gedeon had a big win in his pro career. He beat Paul Gonzalez a couple years ago. Paul Gonzalez, an Olympic team member, so that's a big win for Gedeon.
Gedeon is an excellent fighter. Sometimes it's hard to look good against a fighter that's a little awkward. And Mark is not awkward, but being a left-handed southpaw fighter, it is hard to really look good against him.
Good jab, showing the quickness. Good right hand there by Gedeon, however. 45 seconds to go in round 2.
Gedeon's defense is very good also.
Gedeon in the black trunks with the gold trim. Past 30 seconds to go in round number 2.
And now it seems that Mark has found that he can get that left hand in, and right now he's took a good combination from Gedeon.
Inside the final 15 seconds, and it's interesting to see how Gedeon survives those body shots. A lot of fans think the body shots are going to hurt Ancee Gedeon down the road, but we'll see. We post the final moments of round number 2. He's scheduled for 10 here. Mark Too Sharp Johnson, the WBA Intercontinental Flyweight Champion. Camouflage trunks taking on Ancee Gedeon, originally from Haiti, now making his home in Long Beach, California, in the black trunks with the gold trim.
In the second round, Gedeon did much better. He sat down on his punches. Mark went away from the body attack and went more to the head hunting, and gave Gedeon a chance to get his feet set. And he did hit Mark Too Sharp Johnson with some good combinations. It was a close round. I still think Mark had the edge because of his boxing skills.
That's Charles James. I'm Gary Williams here on Boxing Spotlight, here from the D.C. Armory in Washington, D.C. Big-time boxing returning to the nation's capital.
And Gary, you see that Mark Johnson has gone back to the body attack.
They're slugging away right now. We head toward the first minute of round number 3.
For those of you who watch Boxing Spotlight a lot, you know that I talk about being able to change gears. And I don't know how it's coming off on the camera, but at ringside, you can really see that Mark Johnson has turned it up here in this third round. And it's almost as if he shifted from first gear and just skipped second, went straight to third in this round.
I think, Charles, that comes also with the polish that you talked about. Here's a guy who has learned a lot in California. At one time, he just fought in one gear only. He's been able to move up and change gears more. It's showing here. But Ancee Gedeon is no slouch, as he's taking some great shots and giving some shots in kind.
And Gedeon just caught Mark with a good head shot, but it hasn't discouraged him or backed him up at all. He's definitely not coming out the best in that exchange, but Gedeon is a guy that's a good fighter also, and he's here to fight.
Minute 20 and counting in round 3. We're going to keep it here between rounds. This one shapes up to be a very good one, as Mark Johnson getting some very good competition against Ancee Gedeon.
And those body shots, they haven't taken their effect on Gedeon yet, but that's the kind of thing that'll get you into those lighter rounds. Remember, this is a flyweight fight, and it's very hard to knock one of those flyweights out with one shot.
Mark Johnson stumbled off a punch. Didn't let the punch actually hurt him. Looked like Mark might have been a little bit off balance.
Well, a lot of times when you fight a southpaw, there's a lot of stepping on each other's feet because both fighters' lead feet are at the same point. So you see a lot of that.
We're inside the final minute of round number 3, scheduled for 10 here. The left right hand there by Ancee Gedeon.
Gedeon's
Oh,
got a
beautiful
very good
combination.
chin.
Beautiful combination, Charles, from Mark Johnson.
And that's an example of the chin that I was talking about. Gedeon got hit right on the button, and he didn't even take a backward step. Now he comes back with a good headshot of his own.
Inside the final 15 seconds, this shapes up to be a very good one here from DC Armory. Mark Too Sharp Johnson takes on Ancee Gedeon. We're coming to the end of round number 3. And a little trash talking in between there, the fans. Get excited here as the crowd just enjoying the action. See if we can go to one of the corners, maybe Mark Too Sharp Johnson's corner. As look at Ham Johnson there, he's the one facing you.
And Gary, with the end of that round, you could see how geared up these fighters are. Those guys were throwing bombs, both guys giving and both guys getting. When the round ended, they were so hyped up, it just didn't stop. It looked like they were going to get into it, but referee did a good job and stepped in to make sure there was no fighting after the bell.
We're talking about Marshall Cunningham, the referee, an outstanding referee from the Washington, D.C. area. Does a great job. Also coaches amateur boxing program on his own right. And that's where Mark Johnson came from. You look at Ancee Gedeon. You see how he beat a guy like a Paul Gonzalez who has a lot more credentials than Ancee Gedeon. But he came back strong, an outstanding job as we get ready now for round 4.
And Gary, it'll be interesting to see if these two fighters turn their anger into good boxing skills or they use that anger to get careless, as happens most often in the cases where you let your emotions get the best of you. This is a professional sport, and really it's no place for anger unless you can channel it into good boxing skills.
I think that may be more of a key for Ancee Gedeon for the simple reason he's fighting in someone else's hometown. And he's the one may have to keep his composure a little bit more than even Mark Too Sharp Johnson. Johnson has the fans on his side.
And you can see that Mark now is trying to confuse Gedeon now with more movement. And you can see that, again, he uses the defense. He's a very hard fighter to hit if he doesn't want to be hit. In the second round, he chose to fight.
Inside the first minute of round number 4, scheduled for 10 here from the D.C. Armory. Gary Williams along with Charles James from what has become a loud boxing spotlight crowd here at the D.C. Armory.
And you can see that if Mark Johnson uses movement inside to side and makes this a boxing match more than a slugging match, he has an easier time. I think that in the third round, he wanted to try to get it over with, and he found out that Gedeon has an excellent chin and can also deliver those punches hard to the body and head.
We go back to the fight where Mark Johnson won the WBA Intercontinental Championship. It was because of the quickness that he showed against Alberto Jimenez.
And Mark Johnson just caught Gedeon right on the button with a straight left hand and didn't back him up at all. In fact, Gedeon called him in for more. So you can see, again, the toughness of Gedeon in this fight.
Past the halfway point of round number 4. Scheduled for 10 here on Boxing Spotlight.
Everybody loves the knockout in boxing, but this is the fight that the purists live for. This is a fight where both guys have a good chance of winning the fight. It's a fight where the guys are a little smaller, so it's not going to usually be a quick knockdown. You'll get a chance to see the boxing skills and also the defensive skills in a fight such as this.
Again, Gedeon backed up a little bit, but he came in talking to Mark Johnson off that last punch. Inside 40 seconds to go in round number 4.
And that's a very good tactic for Gedeon also, because in a hometown situation, it's easy for a fighter to get emotional. And Gedeon feels that if he showboats and he acts really enthusiastic, he might get Mark to turn this thing into a war, and that would favor Gedeon's style.
Inside the final 30 seconds of round number 4, Mark Too Sharp Johnson, again, doing a fine job.
And you can see Mark Johnson again going to that left hand, trying to set it up off of his jab.
Heading to the final moments of round 4. Both men trading good punches. A good tactical fight here from the D.C. Armory. Stay with us. Festivities here from the Washington, D.C. Armory. Riddick Bowe makes his home now in Fort Washington, Maryland. Of course, the former heavyweight champion of the world. He's enjoying the action. Rock Newman, his manager, also here as well. Round 5. Scheduled for 10. We're halfway through this one. It's been a good one here as well from the D.C. Armory. Gary Williams along with Charles James. We're also enjoying the action along with our boxing spotlight crew here at the D.C. Armory. And Gedeon threw a nice punch on Mark Johnson. Johnson trying to use the quickness, but the right hand getting in there on Gedeon, on Johnson by Gedeon.
And Gedeon's really pressing the attack. He got Mark against the ropes and got him to stop for a minute and really pounded him with 2 good shots. This is a good fight for Mark Johnson. This is the kind of fight that champions are made out of. You want to walk through all of your opponents, but when you get in those tough championship fights, you have to have had this type of fight under your belt to be a true champion.
Well, I asked Mark during the press conference in the weigh-in how has the competition been for him in California. He said every single person he has fought in California has been a tough one. They all hit hard, so he's gotten used to that type of competition.
And when Mark took the title, he fought a fighter in the flyweight division that did have a lot of punching power. He got caught with some clean shots, but it was Mark Too Sharp Johnson that came out on the better end of the power exchanges in that fight.
Inside the first minute of round number 5, scheduled for 10 here for the D.C. Armory. Now Johnson using combinations again.
And again, when Mark boxes, he's a great fighter to watch. The body attack. He uses the jab and comes back with that straight left hand. He keeps his feet in the right position. Very good fighter to watch.
Halfway through round 5, we talked about the flyweight division. There are very few American flyweights in that division, and I don't think there are too many of the caliber of Mark Too Sharp Johnson.
And you can see some of the showboating that Mark does. When you use movement the way that Mark Johnson does, it's really not showboating. That can really frustrate an opponent when he can't get a good beat or a good rhythm. And that's why Mark Johnson employs some of that feinting, stepping to the side, and then stopping and choosing to fight as he did just there with a 2-piece combination.
I'm hazarding a guess, Charles, but I'm thinking that Mark Johnson does not have the type of movement, a little unorthodox style that most of the flyweights, especially ones around the world, are used to seeing.
Well, one of the things you mentioned earlier, that there aren't too many American fighters, and around the world, most of the fighters use a more orthodox style. And you can see that Mark Johnson, even though he does have all of the technical attributes of a good technical fighter, he also uses some of that pretty showboating style of some of the welterweights or middleweights that you see in the States.
Inside the final 30 seconds of round 5. Again, Johnson going to the body. They're talking to each other a little bit as well. Good left hand there by Mark Johnson. That kind of stopped Gedeon in his tracks.
And that was the first time in this fight that Mark hit Gedeon with a punch that slowed him down.
And the bell rings, and both fellas doing more talking. This is getting a little bit out of hand here. We're going to keep it here, but it's starting to get out of hand here. And you see Ham Johnson, Mark's trainer and father, having to stop Mark Johnson there. But they wanted to go after it way, way, way after the bell. So,
and you know you're in a fight when the guys get a minute rest after a round like you just saw, and neither guy wants to go sit down. They want to keep this thing going until only one guy is standing. This is what boxing is all about.
Well, I tell you something. You look at the flyweight division again. The WBC champion is from Japan, Yuri Arbachkov. Then you have 2 champions from Thailand, and Bishit Sitbang Prachon and Sanchar Plongchir, both from Thailand, both undefeated. In fact, all 3 of the flyweight champions, as we tape this show, are undefeated. So we'll see what happens. And first of all, here we go, round 6. I thought Marshall Cunningham was going to talk to him. The fans getting excited. We go into round 6, scheduled for 10. This has been a very interesting fight between Mark Too Sharp Johnson in the camouflage trunks and Ancee Gedeon from Haiti, now living in Long Beach, California. He's in the black trunks with the gold trim.
And Gary, it's going to be very important for Marshall Cunningham to get control in this fight. He's got to let those fighters know in no uncertain terms that there's not going to be any boxing after the bell.
That was actually the second time that some things were starting to break out after the bell was over. And again, Mark Johnson starting to use the quickness even more now in this fight, but again, Gedeon so far has not been too bothered by that.
Well, these fighters, again, are flyweights, and with flyweights, 115 pounds, it's hard to generate enough power with one shot. Usually a fighter will knock his opponent out after he's accumulated a number of blows and actually worn him down to the point where he just can't handle those tough punches anymore.
Gedeon trying hard to protect his left side with the body as Johnson using that as a target to approach the halfway point in round number 6.
And as this fight goes on, you can see the speed differential. Now Johnson is really finding a home for that straight left hand. As he picks up the pace with his jab, he's able to catch Gedeon as he comes in with that straight left.
Now Johnson showing even more movement halfway through round 6. Now does Gedeon want to stalk? He want to try to come in there as he's doing right now?
Gedeon is fighting the perfect fight for his style. I am very impressed with the way that he's handled himself in this ring tonight. He doesn't look like a fighter that has lost any fights. He looks like a fighter that comes in and can fight with the best of them. And his victory over Gonzalez would be an attestament to that.
Gedeon comes in with a record of 19-2 with 8 KOs inside the final minute of round 6. Mark Johnson 17-1 with 11 KOs.
You can see that Gedeon is still very strong at this stage in the fight. He's taken a lot of body shots, but he's really thrown some good punches.
And Mark Johnson getting warned now by Marshall Cunningham to raise his punches up a little bit. They were a little low down there as we head toward the final 30 seconds of round 6. This has been a good one here from the DC Armory. Glad we could bring it to you here on Boxing Spotlight. Gary Williams along with Charles James. And the uppercut again from Mark Johnson.
You can see that Mark is really winging away now. He's trying to catch Gedeon with some hard shots, but he just hasn't been able to discourage him up to this point in the fight.
It doesn't seem to be frustrating him. Sometimes you get a situation like that, the guy just won't go down. You wonder what's keeping him up, but so far Mark doesn't seem to be frustrated at all as we approach the final seconds of round number 6. Stay with us. You think, Charles, that Mark Johnson may in fact be frustrated in this fight because he wanted to try to put him out and put on a good show for the home fans? He has done that, but so has Ancee Gedeon.
Well, Gary, when in the 3rd round, when Mark Johnson turned it up a notch, that was the speed where you go when you want to put a fighter away and you really want to take the heart out of him. At that point, I think Mark wanted to knock this guy out and show the home crowd what he's learned on the West Coast. When he wasn't able to do that, that's when the taunting started. So I do think he's a little frustrated that he hasn't been able to hurt Gedeon as much as he'd like to in this fight.
We took a close look also at the corners between the rounds, and Ancee Gedeon not breathing hard, very calm in the corner, whereas Mark Johnson taking some deep breaths and having a tough time at one point, looked like anyway from our vantage point, breathing, trying to take deep breaths, trying to get some air in.
Well, Mark Johnson has expended a lot of energy in this fight. Mark has thrown a lot of heavy shots. He's done a lot of movement. And to Gedeon's credit, Gedeon has caught him with some good power shots. So it's understandable that Mark would be a little tired at this point, but he's in great condition, and I don't think that conditioning will be a factor in this fight.
We're in the first minute of round 7. Scheduled for 10 here from the DC Armory.
Gedeon, to my estimation, is fighting the exact game plan that his corner wanted him to. He pressed the attack. He's been the aggressor for most of this fight. And even though he hasn't landed the majority of the punches, he has landed his share of hard, tough punches. He just caught Mark right there with a right hand over the top.
Well, Gedeon, of course, from California, and being in the same division, they had to have seen each other at least. And Gedeon's corner made it plain that he has seen Mark Johnson fight, so they look like they've scouted him very well. As we head toward the final minute of round 7.
I think at this level of competition, it's not a matter of which guy is going to come in and exhibit the most heart. It's just going to be who has the best skills, because it's no quit in either one of these guys. And the fighter that comes in the best conditioning with the best skills tonight will be the guy that leads with the victory.
Fans starting to chant, trying to chant "Too Sharp" for Mark "Too Sharp" Johnson. He's in the camouflage trunks. 40 seconds to go in round 7.
Gary, this fight is really reminiscent of a fight that we saw Eugene Sonny Speed fight a couple years ago. When he was the favorite, he came in for a championship fight. He went away with the victory. He stopped his man in the last round, but it was a very grueling, frustrating fight for Sonny Speed, and it really helped him in his career. to be a tougher fighter. And I think that this is the kind of fight that will propel Mark Too Sharp Johnson into the championships if he can come out of here tonight with the victory.
Inside the final 10 seconds of round 7. Stay with us. We'll have more from the DC Armory in just a moment. Here's round 8, scheduled for 10 here from the DC Armory. Gary Williams along with Charles James. We're seeing a good one here on Boxing Spotlight as Mark Too Sharp Johnson takes on the Haitian Ancee Gedeon, originally from Haiti, now living in Long Beach, California.
Very tough fight so far for Mark Johnson. I have Mark ahead in this fight, but it's a lot of rounds that have been very close, and depending on what the judges like, this could be a hard one to score. But Mark Johnson has done everything in his power to get Ancee Gedeon out of here, and it's just been a tribute to Gedeon's chin, his will, and also his fighting skill that's kept him in this fight. Excellent job also by Gedeon.
We head in the first minute. The judges, two of the judges are female judges, Sheila Harmon Martin, who judged the Riddick Bowe Jesse Ferguson fight at the stadium. Also Maureen Robinson is a judge. I'm trying to remember who the other judge is. I got to get that name for you. But an outstanding fight here. They've got some work to do in this fight so far, because if it all goes like as planned, it could go the distance very easily.
You can see that Mark is back to boxing. He's been very sharp so far in this 8th round. He's thrown some nice uppercuts on the inside and some really good body shots, which is how he started the fight.
Heading toward the halfway point in round number 8. Scheduled for 10 here from DC Armory.
Good right hand by Gedeon. Gedeon looks like he's trying to time Mark now as he comes in and try to catch him with that overhand right. You can see him tapping it with the jab, and there he attempted it, but he came up a little short.
But at the same time, the left hand of Mark Johnson seems to be getting in there a little bit more too. And again, those body shots. But those body shots have not hurt Gedeon that much.
And Gedeon just caught Mark with that overhand right.
Good body shots there, but Gedeon coming right back.
But Gary, this has been basically the way that this fight has gone. Gedeon has thrown some good power shots, but he just hasn't thrown as many punches as Mark. If you look, Mark is about out-punching him 3-1 as far as the shots that he lands. Then when Gedeon comes back, he comes back with a very dramatic punch, but just not an accumulation of punches.
They're both landing their shots right now. We're inside the final minute of round number 8.
Look for a hook by Mark Johnson. Right now, Gedeon is leaning in.
He threw a right hook there. We head toward the 30-second mark.
And there's the right hook again. And the right hook is going to be a punch at this distance that Mark Johnson should be able to land. There it is.
The combination there. 25 seconds left. And Mark Johnson starting to take some command in this bout. Set at 15 seconds to go. We'll keep it here between rounds.
And Mark went from the body up to the head, but again, he hasn't discouraged Gedeon. And when Gedeon does get his one shot in, it's a very tough shot.
Inside the final seconds, round 8, we'll keep it here. We get ready for the 9th round. Both men landed some big-time punches, and the fans starting to stand and applaud. I look around the arena, see Dave Jacobs standing, of course, former trainer Sugar Ray Leonard, and some fans starting to really enjoy the fight between Mark Johnson and Ancee Gedeon.
Beats on the run. This is Chris. How may I help you?
This is the TDD operator.
It took an act of Congress to order.
Halfway through round 9, scheduled for 10 here, Mark Too Sharp Johnson taking on Ancee Gedeon. Quite frankly, he didn't miss a whole lot in that first half of the 9th round. Both guys doing an outstanding job, as they have been throughout. Mark Johnson in the camouflage trunks, and Ancee Gedeon in the black trunks with the gold trim. It's been a great fight throughout, and looks like Ancee Gedeon thought he might have been thumbed in the eye.
And Gedeon was doing better in this round. It looked like he got thumbed, and one of the things you can tell with a thumb, if his eye swells up really quick, usually it is a result of a thumb. It was hard to tell from the vantage point that we saw.
We're inside the final minute now, round 9.
And now Mark is like a shark with blood in the water. He's really come forward since he's seen the discomfort in Gedeon.
The combination there, but you see Ancee Gedeon every now and then going to his left eye with his left hand. 40 seconds to go in the round.
And Gary, it was really unfortunate because I think that this was one of Gedeon's better rounds. In the ninth, he did come out and press the attack. As you can see, he's been catching Mark with some of those hard power shots as Mark dances and fights him in the boxing style.
And this round is over. We'll keep it here as we get ready for the 10th and final round.
Let's see if we can get the camera in the corner of Gedeon to see if we can get a good look at his eye. Right now, Gedeon is wiping at his eye like he might have been thumbed. But the thing about a thumb is usually when a fighter's thumb, his eye will close really quick.
In his corner, you look at Noe Cruz, who is had many world champions in his career as a trainer. Alex Patton also in his corner.
The other thing that happens with the thumb, those gloves have basically like a seam in them where the fold of the glove is located. A lot of times you'll get that seam right in the eye and it'll feel like a thumb. It didn't look like it was a thumb by the way that the punch was thrown, because the thumb guy, you usually have to try to turn the glove in an unnatural way, especially for a southpaw, to catch a guy in the eye the way that Gedeon complained. But it looks like his eye is in pretty good shape and it doesn't look like an overabundance of swelling.
So now we start the 10th and final round. Mark Two Shop Johnson in the camouflage trunks. Record of 17-1 with 11 KOs. Ancee Gedeon from Haiti. Living now in Long Beach, California, 19-2 with 8 KOs. Of course, Mark Johnson is originally from Washington, D.C., making his boxing home in California.
And this is 10th final round. This is a very close fight. It's going to be hard to score. I think that Mark has a big advantage in this fight because I have given him most of the close rounds due to his boxing skills, but it hasn't been because Gedeon didn't come in to fight. He's thrown some really clean punches and some hard punches and caught Mark Too Sharp Johnson. That's something that we don't usually see.
Mark Johnson had shown a great chin. He showed that, of course, in the fight when he won the WBA Intercontinental Championship as he beat Alberto Jimenez. He took some big-time shots from Jimenez and came out on top. And since then, this has just been another day of the office for Mark Johnson, but I don't know if he expected as tough with Ancee Gedeon.
And now you can see the two sharpness. You can see as Mark Johnson boxes, how he gets his combinations in. He throws punches and bunches. And remember, this is the 10th round of a grueling fight. This fight has basically been toe-to-toe throughout the entire bout, and both of these guys still have tons of stamina left.
I think something you mentioned how Mark Johnson throughout this fight, for some part, had been out-punching Ancee Gedeon at least 3-1.
Yeah, in the later stages of the fight, in rounds 7, 8, and 9, Gedeon closed that number a lot, but Mark is still throwing appreciably more punches than Gedeon. But Gedeon, again, has thrown very flashy punches when he has landed with big hooks and straight right hands.
Hey, enjoy the final minute of the final round. Here from the D.C. Army, an outstanding contest between Mark Johnson and Ancee Gedeon.
You can see the defense of Mark Johnson, how he seems to always be just out of harm's way. Very good boxing style to get far enough away from the punch where you don't get hit, but also to be in position to punch back.
Gedeon now trying to pressure him.
Good combinations to the body of Gedeon.
And Gedeon just used his head on Mark Johnson, and Cunningham warned him. He raised his head up right into Mark Johnson's chin there.
And that's one of the reasons why you hate for your fighter to stay in close in a fight when he can box his man. This is the 10th round. The last thing Mark Johnson needs is to get a cut because of a headbutt in close.
Inside the final 30 seconds of round 10.
And Mark Johnson can use his speed and his boxing skills to stay out of harm's way if he chooses. But a lot of times in this fight, he's chosen to stand flat-footed and just slug with Gedeon.
In the final 10 seconds of round 10. And we will have the decision of this fight between Mark Johnson and Ancee Gedeon in just a moment. Stay with us.
And now you can see some good sportsmanship. Both guys were wanted to win the fight. It was a lot of jawing going on, but when it's all said and done, both guys recognized that their opponent gave their all and fought as hard as they could to come out of here with a victory.
And watch the fans. They stand along ringside and throughout the crowd. Even see Rock Newman, the manager, Riddick Bowe back there, and he's standing and applauding, and all the fans around ringside and in the arena in D.C. Armory enjoying this fight between Mark Johnson and Ancee Gedeon.
And Gary, this is what boxing is all about. Fantastic fight. I mean, you couldn't have asked for more in on the undercard and the co-feature for a championship fight. And if the next fight is anywhere near as interesting as this, everyone will have gotten what they came here for. And it's just 10 rounds of professional boxing at its very best.
So go to the judges, and we'll see what the judges have for this one. This ought to be very interesting. And we'll get the scores to Discombobulating Jones, and hopefully we will also get the winner of this bout for an interview.
Gary, this is the kind of fight, I don't know how much they'll have left with the effort that both guys gave in there tonight. They might be hard-pressed to get enough energy to give an interview.
Very true. That's very true. Mark Johnson taking pictures for some of the ringside press people. I think Gedeon has to be very satisfied with the job he did tonight. He did an outstanding job against a very polished fighter, and of course you can't say enough about the polish of a Ancee Gedeon.
Gary, we're going to have to check the ratings when we leave to see where they have Ancee Gedeon in the flyweight division. An excellent-looking fighter out of the West Coast, as his record of 19-2 with 8 KOs would indicate. He is a very good fighter also.
Again, we talk about Gedeon in his career. Had a victory over Mr. Paul Gonzalez, the Olympian, former Olympian. And to get a guy over, win over someone in that counter of caliber, I should say, that's outstanding. Discombobulating Jones is in the ring, and he will have the decision of the judges.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we give the official scoring, let's have a well-deserved round of applause for both fighters, please. The official scoring is as follows. Judge David Jordan scores the bout 96-94. Judge Lloyd Scaife scores the bout 99-91. And Judge Maureen Robinson saw it 98-92 for the winner. By unanimous decision, Mark Too Sharp Johnson. Let's hear it for a game, Ancee Gedeon.
Well, the scores are very close, 96-94. David Jordan, Louis Scaife scored about 99-91, and Maureen Robinson scored at 98-92. Very close, but again, a unanimous decision victory for Mark Too Sharp Johnson.
Well, Gary, sometimes the score isn't very indicative of how the fighters fought. This fight could have been judged a washout for Mark Johnson, 100-90, but it wouldn't indicate the effort that Gedeon put in because all of those rounds were close. It's just that...
Der Peter Anratz.